Hello and welcome to the Stateside Soccer
What's
Show.
happening?
So I was on Twitter and I just retweeted the the link to the show so that way people could see it, the live show. And I
Yeah.
was saying "come hang" and it changed it to "coke bang."
No,
Had to erase it real
don't do
quick. And I
that
was
here.
like,
Nope.
"Come hang."
Yeah.
Um,
Don't
my
do
name is
drugs, kids.
Jordan.
Yeah.
He's Logan. How are you today, Logan?
We're lucky, Jordan. We're fortunate here. The hurricane missed us completely, and is going further north. So
Is it
not so
already
good.
passed? I thought it was like.
It's coming.
Oh,
We're
okay.
gonna get some rain and gust, but not anything too abnormal. It's pretty much a normal storm here, 20-mile-per-hour winds here, but I know it's getting ready to rattle the panhandle. So I guess thinking about everybody there that's an MLS fan or listening to the podcast. So these things are always tough, but yeah. We're doing good. It's cloudy. I guess the one benefit of it is it's going to make for the weather after a hurricane is oddly and eerily quiet and cool out, and it's a very odd. It's strange if you've experienced it. You know what I'm talking about. So, but how you doing, Jordan? How's everything going?
Doing good. I mean, it's been a whirlwind of a week here. I can't even tell you what's happened, but I am. I'm glad to be back. We have some big news that's been happening in the league that we'll be covering as well. Plus, we have games coming up tomorrow, Wednesday, which might be the day people are listening to this, and they've already put out a who can clinch the playoffs. We'll go over who can clinch a playoff spot Wednesday night. Hint, it's not many teams. Because we're still like quite a few games out. We do know that there's going to be probably Messi and some of those other players missing some time due to the international dates coming up as well. And Tata Martino was also saying that MLS is looking at maybe not playing through those international windows. So we'll kind of get our thoughts on if we think that's a good idea or how they can make it work because the schedule is kind of congested as it is, especially with the Leagues Cup now in every summer. We had the U.S. Open Cup semifinals. We know who the two finalists are. Those are Inter Miami and Houston Dynamo. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. And then MLS action was back in full force over the weekend for the second week in a row. And we'll take a look at how the table has shifted and maybe who should be on the hot seat next. And some playoff format changes, maybe. They just put out this thing today. Last week about the playoff format after we recorded. So just going to see if there's any big differences we notice on there. So we can where do we want to start at here? Open Cup or a coaching hire by Toronto as they've now replaced Bob Bradley, or some of these little items. What would you rather do first?
There's a lot to pick from.
An interactive show, Logan.
Yeah. So if you're in no, I'm kidding. But I would say, I guess we can talk. Did you want to go into talking about Tata and the international?
We can, yeah. So
Okay.
This was something I saw tweeted out. I don't see it on actual any of the news articles here on the MLS site, but I've seen a few people talking about it. It looks like Tata Martino was doing some, pre-game pressers because of the games coming up this week. And they were saying, MLS may not be playing through some not transfer windows, the international windows. So this was from Franco Panizzo, who covers Inter Miami, and he put out this video here where his quote here is, Tata dropped a bit of a news bomb regarding MLS not playing through FIFA's international fixture dates. Tata said, I haven't understood that they are analyzing that for next year, and it is probable that it will happen. I'm assuming what he means happen is not playing through them and not we will be playing through them. It's kind of worded a little odd, but this is something that, can affect a team, right? Like, if we just even look at LAFC and Philadelphia last year, you know, they finished very close, just like what, a point or two off of the supporter shield Philadelphia did, and that changed who hosted the game. And I'm not saying it has to do with international teams. It could, because Blake was away on international duty, right? And he was this year, and they kind of struggled at times when he's gone. But when you're playing without your best players, I mean, you have a team like Miami now that has all these stars, where you have any team that's getting these call ups, and you're losing a core part of your team, and the squads are not deep enough as it is already, it can definitely change the outcome of something like a supporter shield or hosting rights in a playoff game. Now, of course, you know, 34 games a season or whatever, you're thinking that's just to get in the playoffs. And then from there, we can win it all. But again, it could come down to who's hosting. It could come down to who's, hoisting the supporter shield at the end of the season. And if I'm a team, I don't know if I want to play without my best players.
Yeah, and I think too that the one thing that with this league more so than any, they're impacted by the weird schedule that CONCACAF gets on. Um, like if you remember, they'll play in the summer, or they'll play some of these international competitions, and European teams are still playing. So the European players don't come over to play on the U.S. men's national team. You also have MLS players that are on the U.S. men's national team that'll play, and then in other windows. So like the international windows, they don't all align. I will say MLS would be joining everybody else, I think, of the big leagues, where they stop completely for international play. So
Yeah, really, I think like it's always the second tiers that don't like
yeah,
the championship usually plays through and stuff.
right. So I think in that sense it helps, especially because you're going to have players who, um, especially like I guess I mean look at Inter Miami, and then I guess I have a kind of a question that branches off of that. Do you think? I mean, I know teams won't do it because obviously they want to win as many games in the windows leading up to World Cup. But it's so weird to me that in international play they don't typically retire, and then maybe 2 years into the international win, or 2 years into the lead up into World Cup, like Messi might be like, yeah, no, I'm not playing anymore in international play, and it's like I don't know, it's so strange to me just because it's like you start a new cycle and you're playing with players that aren't even going to be on the World Cup roster. And I know that
Well,
happens.
yeah,
They play
some
out of
players will definitely um hang it up right after a tournament. We're seeing it with Megan Rapinoe, who's retiring at the end of this World Cup that just happened, but she's going to play like a farewell game. Um, but I think the way Messi has been, I mean, he did retire the national team and came back. Um, because he was, I don't know if he was just using it as threats to get his way in Argentina or something, but like that was something he did, especially that was like Copa America 2016. But I think from what he said too, he's not even thinking of retiring right now. And when you look at the way he's performing and playing anyway, I mean, look, he was one of the best players at the World Cup, and at his age, So I think for him, he's probably thinking he could play in 2026. I wouldn't put it past him. But I think if he gets through this cycle and it's noticeable that he's not playing up to his standard, then maybe he will retire or just become a bench player even at that point. But yeah, I think he said he's not even really thought about retiring from football totally. And he's just having fun. He had this quote like how he just really wanted to get back to having fun with football, and he wasn't really experiencing that at PSG, and he is here. So sounds like he's really enjoying it. He looks happy on the field, and winning helps, right? Like when you're winning, it does help. But I mean, they were winning at Paris, and it still wasn't, super fun for him. But I think part of that is the egos that happen to be at Paris, of which only Mbappe is left now, as Neymar has left as well. Um, but no, I think it's good if we can somehow find a way to not play in the international windows. And it's all about now trying to figure out how do you do that and still fit in the season. Well, one way you could do it is you could shorten the games to maybe 32 instead of 34. But what you could also do is just lessen the amount of teams that get in the playoffs. Then you have less playoffs you have to do, and the season can end earlier. Or it can end at the same time. And you can, what I'm saying, you could have those weeks off that as you eliminate playoff rounds or whatever, you can limit some of that to get in there. You could also maybe, if you wanted to, schedule games for teams that get knocked out of Leagues Cup. I don't know how that would work really, but something you could do. Regardless, I think they'll look into it. I don't know if it's going to happen next year, but I think they want it to happen next year because you know who the draw is to watch MLS season pass? Messi. You know who's still getting called up by his team? Messi. So I think they might try to figure it out so that way you're not tuning in to watch Inter Miami without Messi on the field. I really think that's what they'll do. I assume he's not going to play in the next set of games here because they went extra time in this Open Cup match and went to penalties again, and they were, it's just how often they were playing to penalties in the League Cup. Now, of course, they didn't have extra time in that, but still, it was a lot of games, and I see them probably giving him a rest soon. I don't think they can continue to trot him out there every game, but he might come in at like half or something like that. We also have Inter Miami. Let's stick with them right now. They've began construction on Monday on Miami Freedom Park, which is going to be the house that Messi built, right? So 2025 is when this stadium is supposed to open, and that is the last year of his contract right now. So if he doesn't extend that, he would play in this stadium. So that's pretty cool that he would be able to play in the stadium. 25,000 seat stadium, 58 acres public park, and an entertainment district, which is scheduled to open in 2025. So yeah, I mean, the concept art looks great and hot.
Extremely warm.
Yeah.
But again, I think, the amount of money though, the investment. I wonder, Jordan, if they went in and went, let's start thinking expansion on the stadium we haven't quite built yet. Just because, I imagine that they'd be able to fit so many more people in there if Messi's there. Like, I don't know. It would be interesting just because it would be on the tail end of his time. But I don't know. If he's playing a year or two more after that, I could see them being like, let's build a bigger stadium. And I think eventually that does come, right? I think, not soon, but it is funny that they've all built these new stadiums. And I could see in the next 20 years, teams going, man, we just don't have enough room to fit some of these fans in because our league's grown.
Yeah. Yeah, and the prices are going to be insane.
Uh-huh.
Let's stick with Miami again here. They've got an update yesterday here on when they will be facing off against Charlotte, which was originally scheduled for August 20th, but because they reached the Leagues Cup Final Four, they had to move that game. It's being rescheduled for October 18th at 8 p.m. And then decision day is October 21st, which is when they will play Charlotte FC again. So they're going to play Charlotte FC on the 18th and 21st, which could be interesting because Miami, as we know, is near the bottom of the table. They are the bottom. No, they're not. Toronto is. Sorry. See, they're already rising up. Miami is 14th. Charlotte is 12th with 8 points between them. They play each other twice. That's actually a 12-point swing because when you play each other once, it's a 6-point swing because you're getting 3 points that your opponent is not. And playing each other back to back at the end of October when you're trying to make the playoffs, that might give them a chance here. We'll see, though. We'll see. I mean, because it's not like Charlotte's in a playoff spot, but they're only 3 points out of a playoff spot, Charlotte. So we'll see if those last 2 games even mean anything for Miami or Charlotte as we get closer to it. I can't believe it. The season is over in less than 2 months until we go to the playoffs. It's happening quickly.
Yeah. I do wonder. I'm worried, too, just because, I mean, something's going to have to give, right? Like, they're going to either have to start playing in February.
They did.
Well, beginning of February 1st, kickoff. That'd be great, right? In places like Philadelphia. Or play in December. Like, they're going to, oh, man. I'm interested because they're going to add more teams to this league. It's
MLS Cup is already in December. Like they're running out of months to put stuff.
Are we?
What they'll have to do, they'll have to cut the games down from 34 at some point to 30 or 32.
Right. So there's 29 teams in the league.
Mm-hmm.
It's the biggest league in the world.
Yep. And DC, by the way, is not playing decision day. They're the ones sitting out. So they'll kind of know exactly where they sit.
That's wild to me.
Decision day.
Could you imagine being that team? Oh, that would be awful. Because they could be a team, Jordan, on the bubble.
They
on
could.
That 9 spot. It'd be like, oh dear.
They are currently in 10th with 30 points. They're 2 points back of Chicago. So they can, in the next 2 months or whatever, when they have, how many more games do they have here? They've played 26. So they have 8 games left. And they'll play all of those before decision day. And they'll know at that point if they're in a playoff spot. Like, they'll know if they're out of a playoff spot. Then they may not be watching any game, right?
Yeah.
But if they're in a playoff spot, they're going to be watching all of those bottom teams and being like, let's see what happens. Imagine if Miami and Messi are the ones that take that last spot and push DC out of it on the decision day when DC is not even playing in. Okay. Let's take a look at some transfers that have happened. New England have officially transferred Petrovic to Chelsea FC. I know that was happening while we were kind of like on here. It was kind of hinted at. It wasn't official. $17.5 million fee after they paid like $1 million the year before. That's insane.
That's a good flip.
Maybe Chelsea should have been scouting where the Revs were scouting. Yeah, so he's out. And to replace him, then they go out and get Tomas Vaklik, which is who is coming over from where is he coming from? I have the crest here, but I'm trying to read what it is. Okay, so he was at FC Basel for a bit. And he's been at Sparta Prague, Sevilla, Olympiacos. Yeah. So he's coming from Huddersfield, though. I knew it looked like an English crest. I was like, why is it taking me forever to find out where this is? He's kind of on the older end, though, like 30-something. So I'm thinking he's going to be more of a stopgap while they try to find their next.
Sounds Croatian.
That's what I would think. He may have been. I exited out of it, so I'm not sure.
How dare you?
Maxime Chenot, by the way, has left NYCFC, and he's joining French League 2 side AJ Ajaccio. I know that's probably not how you say it in French, but that's how I'm saying it. America, right? Freedom fries. Okay.
We should have a whole episode of us trying to say names.
Pronounce names. Oh, my goodness. Okay. So we have some games coming up here. Before we get to that, let's take a look at those Open Cup games. Cincinnati and Miami, and Houston and Salt Lake. So Cincinnati came out to a lead here 2-0 in the 18th minute by Luciano Acosta and then by Brandon Vasquez in the 53rd minute. Vibes are high at TQL, which is where this game was hosted. And then, Leo Campagna, with an assist from Messi, scores in the 68th minute. And you're like, yeah, maybe they left it a little too late. Well, they wanted to leave it even later. 90th plus 7. Campagna again with another assist from Leo Messi to make it 2-2. And really, with like the last kick of the game here, to send it to extra time, where Joseph Martinez scores in the 93rd minute, assisted by Kermashi. And you're like, wow, they're really going to do it. But there's a great goal by Kubo, who scores in the 114th minute to make it 3-3. And we go to penalties, where Kubo steps up and scores. Messi steps up and scores. All of Miami makes theirs, and it gets to the 5th kicker for Cincinnati, Haglund, who misses the penalty, and Kermashi makes his. And Messi's going to another final just a month and a half into his tenure here at Inter Miami.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, it really is. Especially these deep tournaments. I mean, you're talking about. I mean, obviously he wasn't here for the whole run of U.S. Open, but I think I don't know. It's impressive to me, and in games too, Jordan, that he comes in and half the time he's coming in late, coming in the second half where he's had effect. He comes up with it's like a miracle man, and we don't. I would say the closest thing that this league's ever had to him was Zlatan. So where whenever he touches the ball, magic happens. Wayne Rooney was pretty magical in what he did too, but never to the magnitude. I mean, the stats are astonishing. I think in any league it would grab attention. Obviously, people are going to still continue to bash MLS for not being as competitive, but he's also done it against Liga MX teams.
Yeah.
He's done it.
He's done it in La Liga.
Countries. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Like he's gone on these stretches, and people can look it up. He's gone on stretches where he's had 9 goals and 6 assists and 8 games. He's done things like that. Like this is just not. It's not unheard of, and I think people. I mean, be honest.
We're talking
right?
about the best player in the world,
right?
Maybe ever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like at certain times, it's not an indictment on the league.
No.
Sometimes it's just he's that good.
But we've talked about this before, right? As he's in La Liga, right? It's him versus Ronaldo, and if you weren't like a La Liga fan, even if you're in Europe, you weren't turning on La Liga. You're a Premier League loyal and faithful, and that's who you put all it. So you weren't turning on. Like you can say it all you want. Like I watch European soccer. I don't always turn on the best player in the world, and especially when he went to PSG, you weren't turning those games on because nobody could. So
yeah, nobody had in sport.
Right.
Yeah,
nobody does. So we've talked about this before, right? We can beat that drum over and over again, and people will continue to say that about MLS. But I think what people don't realize is that people like the Sounders go and play in that what was it? What's that tournament called where they go when they win Champions League? It's
Club World Cup.
Club World Cup. Thank you. To play in that and be competitive also, and in a preseason type form. Again, I think people just want to put down MLS because they know what MLS could become. They're going to say those American snobs, but if you look around at the different countries and sports that we have in common, so for instance, basketball, baseball, hockey, like our leagues are bigger than all of theirs, and I think that's kind of where we are in the soccer world right now. They're afraid of what MLS could become. And the money that could go into it. And now you have all these stars turning their heads saying, hey, that, it's either Saudi or the US. It's no longer, hey, let's just go play in the Premier League. Like all these guys could still play in the Premier League, Messi could easily play for any Premier League team. Neymar could play for any, Busquets could play for a Premier League team. Like these guys could still play in that league. So again, it's fascinating to me when people are like foo-foo on it because, yes, the talent's not there yet. No, we are not a full league of just really good players yet, but I think we're getting there. And I think this is ultimately that gap that we're kind of filling in. And Messi doing this and taking teams into the finals, like through in his sleep, it's just amazing to me.
All right. Let's get into, I think, but before we, I guess, real quick, Houston beat RSL 3-1. Wasn't much. I mean, okay. Herrera scores 45 plus 5. It gets tied up in the 64th minute by Julio to make it a 1-1 game. We go extra time, and it quickly in 105 minute here, which is right at like what the halftime of extra time, Houston scores again, and then we get a red card by Vera in the 119th, and then in the 120 plus 5, Houston puts it away to make it a 3-1 victory. RSL only had 32% possession. They had 11 shots to Houston's 30. Houston had 10 shots on goal to RSL's 2. I mean, RSL's like what, third place in the West, or they were, they're fourth now. Houston is fifth. So there wasn't a lot between these two, but Houston has been looking, like I said last week, like pretty darn good in this season. And they have a shot to maybe be the first team to beat Miami. Now, of course, Miami might lose between the final. The final's not until like end of September. So we have some time. But yeah, pretty interesting. I think Houston is one of those teams that could maybe just see them have like a random win against Miami in an Open Cup final, but I don't think it'll be like easy for Miami. Like I said, I think Houston's actually pretty decent this year, and they've kind of been a surprise team for me. We didn't know how much Ben Olsen would move the needle, but he's come in, he's made some changes to the team, and they look pretty darn good. Which means next year they won't, because that was kind of his thing at DC. They were like good one year, bad the next, good the next year. Real quick though, let's talk about this debate that's been happening. I don't know if you saw this at all, Logan, on the old Twitter, but a U.S. player, Noah Lyles, who's playing for the USA basketball team in the FIBA World Cup, threw some shade at the NBA's championship, where they call it, world champions. He said, "I love the U.S., but that ain't the world." Right. And that's kind of something we've maybe talked about before. Right. But all these NBA players really took offense to this, saying the NBA is the best league in the world. That's why the champs are world champs. Me personally, I think it's weird that we do say like World Series for baseball, world champions for football, basketball, hockey. Like we do all that, right? Like every single sport here, we call them world champs. And I know people that are soccer fans that say that's perfectly fine because MLS is not the best. So that's why MLS doesn't use that term. But I have a problem with this, Logan. I do have a problem with us claiming world champions when we've only faced, other American teams. A lot of people's excuses, well, the best players are playing here. So, it's to the people of the world, right? Like Dirk Nowitzki, right? Like all these players that have come over from other countries to play here, right? Jokic now, like all the new players that come over from Europe for the NBA. But we still don't see this in soccer. The best players in the world play in the Champions League. And when they win the Champions League, they call themselves champions of Europe. They never claim to be world champs, even though the best players play there. Messi's not a European, right? But he is still crowned as a European champion. because they won the Champions League. So, in my opinion, some people take this as a slight of, well, because I saw a lot of arguments, Logan, saying, well, and I got back and forth with some guy about it, but they were like, well, do you mean to tell me the Denver Nuggets wouldn't just steamroll a European basketball team? And I said, no, they would. They absolutely would. But that's not what the argument is for me. The argument is the name. We're calling on world champions. They didn't win a world championship. There is actually a FIBA basketball club World Cup. The top European leagues don't send their team there, and the top, NBA only sends G League teams there. So, in my opinion, if you want to be the world champion, you have to play in a world championship and not just NBA championship, which, by the way, NBA stands for National Basketball Association, not World Basketball Association. So your thoughts, Logan, on what it takes to be a world champion in sports?
I mean, my world champion Chicago Cubs of 26. No, I'm kidding. I do think it is weird that we call it that. I've never agreed much with it. Yeah, like, of course, the argument's going to be made. Like, well, yeah, but every single one of the U.S. teams would probably beat the hell out of this team in England or this team in Spain or China or South Korea. Like, yeah, like in a 7-game series, our team would win. But that's not the argument. It's a very America first mindset, which I don't agree with in sports because you're the league's champion. Why do you need to be the world champion? Like none of that cares. Like you're not parading in Asia. Like it's not part of the championship. So yeah, no, I agree with you. That is a weird, but I could see what people mean. Like I could see where people are coming from and the fact that they think, well, the U.S. would just dominate because they dominate in most sports. But that's not the real argument. The real argument is we shouldn't be calling ourselves world champions unless you're a world champion. Now, soccer, I think, is one of those sports where you could determine a world champion because you could determine that all the teams and you could collect all the teams from all the federations, the leagues, and you could play them in a Club World Cup. And there
Which
you go.
they do. And
right.
And that's why I wanted to also bring that up. I brought up the Club World Cup because there is a basketball one, like I said. But, like I said, NBA doesn't send their team. Neither does FIBA, really. But we do have a Club World Cup in soccer. And while people would say, well, the NBA team would win the Club World Cup every single time. You know who's won 15 out of 18 Club World Cups? UEFA. The UEFA champion has won 15 out of the 18 Club World Cups. But they still send their main team. Now, of course, they might also play their youth players at times or, give a break to a player, right? It's not always going to be like, Messi starting the game for Barcelona in a Club World Cup final, right? But what my point with that was they still don't call themselves world champions until they actually win that Club World Cup. And then you have the other layer of us having a World Cup as well, where we have to claim world champions that way too. But I think it's interesting because for some reason, people let that get in their way of the whole, well, the best players are playing here. I'm like, yeah, but the best players play over in Europe, and when they win, they still just call themselves European champions. Yeah, it's not the arrogance, right, of being like, well, we're world champions, actually. Because if we go to the Club World Cup, we'll just win anyway, right? Like they don't usually think like that. All right, let's go ahead and quickly look at who can clinch the playoffs this week. Logan, your guess on who can clinch the playoffs this week?
I mean, it's got to be one of the top two, but I'm going to go with Cincinnati.
Yep, it's Cincinnati. They can clinch a berth. That's it, by the way.
Yeah.
They can clinch a berth if they win at Atlanta or if they draw at Atlanta and New York lose and draw at New England and Chicago lose and draw versus Vancouver and Charlotte lose and draw versus Orlando. Or if New York lose/draw at New England, Chicago lose versus Vancouver, and Charlotte lose/draw versus Orlando. Or New York lose/draw at New England, Chicago draw versus Vancouver, and Charlotte lose versus Orlando. So not many options there for clinching. Let's talk about they're clinching for the playoffs. Let's see if there's been any updated to the playoffs. And there has, because we're introducing a single elimination wildcard match before an enhanced round one, best of three. We talked about this in the preseason. This was part of the new layout due to having more playoff teams. The final match day of the regular season is October 21st. All clubs will play 34 games. Overall, 18 teams qualify, the top 9 from the East and the top 9 from the West. Seeds 1 through 7 automatically qualify for the round 1 best of 3. Seeds 8 through 9 play a one-off wild card match. Those wild card matches will be from October 25th through the 26th. The round 1 series, the round 1 best of 3 will be October 28th through November 12th. The conference semifinals and the conference finals are through November 25th through December 3rd. And MLS Cup presented by Audi is December 9th. So not much change. I think what we really know now is we're locked into those dates. But just a refresher here on what we're playing for. Well, not me. I'm not playing. But, the thing.
Why aren't you playing, Jordan? They not invite you?
I never get picked.
Kind of rude. Jeez. It's showing. It's not inclusive.
So this last weekend, Atlanta beat Nashville 4-0. Nashville doesn't usually lose by that much. They've, I guess, had a little bit of wind out of their sails from the Miami loss. Charlotte beat LAFC 2-1. Shock there. LAFC trashed Colorado 4-0 on Wednesday, though. Cincinnati beat New York City FC, and this is kind of who I was referring to of how long does Cushing have at NYCFC? They have been abysmal. Logan, they're in 13th place. A team that's historically pretty good. Won an MLS Cup, 2 years ago?
Yeah. I'm going to go with the fact that when you don't invest money correctly in any aspect of what a fail, right? From City Football Group. I think looking at where they finish, I can't imagine they make the playoffs. And we talked about this too. We talked about how much of a shamble their team was in. Like they transfer all these players out and got, I think, 2 or 3 people in before the season started. They were having a hard time filling out a roster. So I think, again, it's disappointing, right? I think if you're a fan of NYCFC, the only thing you're looking forward to is the stadium being announced. But again, to not be able to score, to not have a prolific goal scorer, that was a big concern that we had. Was Gabby Pereira, was he going to be enough? I don't think the answer is yes. Tati Castellanos leaves. I don't think there's much to really write home about many of their players. I think guys like Tyler Magno, who could have stepped up and really performed. A young kid hasn't done what I think what people thought he would be. But yeah, again, you look through this roster, there's some major concerns about just different holes that you have filling out a roster. They're a mess, and I don't think they get out of this anytime soon. And City Football Group, again, it's the investment of money, but they're going to build the stadium, and then all of a sudden it's going to become just this place where nobody goes. I don't know what it is, Jordan, about these feeder teams, but geez, like these are brutal to watch.
I think they'll have people show up. I mean, the thing is, they're going to have to actually look. Once you have the stadium built, you're going to have to put money into the team again. You can't be a feeder team. You're going to have to go out and get a Messi, like a David Villa, like that they used to have. Or otherwise, I mean, yeah, maybe nobody will show up. But I think one thing why people will show up there instead of Red Bulls is because it's actually in the city, right? Like it's going to be right next to City Field for the Mets. So we'll see. You would hope that NYCFC don't get like the Mets curse on them from being near City Field, where they just absolutely implode every year now. But we'll see. We'll see. Okay, so we didn't really talk about it much though, real quick, but Jonathan Herdman is leaving Canada national team for the men's, and he has been hired now at Toronto FC. He's taking over on October 1st once he leaves his current post as the Canadian men's national team. So he's not even really going to be coaching until like the last 3 weeks of the season. I doubt much will change for Toronto, who are currently in last place in the East, and with Miami on the rise, they would need to try to catch NYCFC because I think Miami will keep on moving up at this point. If Toronto doesn't get their new coach until October 1st, then less time for them to really get it on. This is probably more of a move for next year. But are you surprised by Herdman leaving the Canadian national team for a TFC job here?
Absolutely. I'm confused. I saw this one. I forgot to send this to you, but I'm assuming you'd seen it already before I was going to send it to you. But I saw this and I was scrolling through, and man, I like the Canadian national team. I know they biffed out of the World Cup in flavorful fashion, but they had a really tough group. I thought that they were, Jordan, the best team in CONCACAF last year, like year round. And honestly, I thought they were going to run away with CONCACAF. Like I thought we were just going to have to be playing for second place, and Mexico would have been the team that we were fighting with in Panama. So I don't. I guess there's an allure, right? And we've talked about this multiple times with U.S. men's national team. Is there are club coaches and there are international coaches, and they typically don't do well at both. So it'll be interesting to see. He's inheriting a mess. Insigne is still around, yes. So it seems like he's going to inherit a locker room that's already broken in spirit. Michael Bradley, the team captain, his dad used to coach there too, so that's awkward. I think that he's a good coach. It'll be interesting to see if TFC needs to completely tear down the team. Like, tell Michael Bradley, hey, it's been great. This has been fun. But I think we all move on from here. You get rid of that team, you gut it completely. They're really good with some of their younger players too. They've always had pretty good young players come through there. So I think you build a team with some of your youth, and then you build. They've got money. They always have money. So it seems that, and that's an attractive city to go to for international players. So I think shocked, yes, would be an understatement. I was bad. My mind was boggled when I saw that he had dropped out of the national team to take on this hot mess.
I think it kind of makes sense, though. I think he probably feels like he's taken Canada as far as he can.
Yeah.
We also know that Canada has kind of had a tumultuous thing with their soccer association, right? Like they've had strikes that they've kind of had with their players, right? There was like that whole issue, and then also issue with the women's team in Canada. Then there was the fact that they filed for bankruptcy and stuff. So I could totally see him being like, look, my next job is going to be at a very stable place like an MLS club where I know I get paid, and maybe they're not as much infighting with the association, right? So I could totally see that maybe. But I mean, I'm kind of excited to see what he can do with Toronto, but I'm kind of disappointed that we're only going to see that for like 3 weeks, and then it'll be, back to the off season because I don't think they're making the playoffs. So at that point, we won't really be able to judge it until next year. But maybe we'll do our third straight season preview where we're kind of high on TFC and be let down again.
Absolutely not. They're going. They might be my wooden spoon. Lock it in now.
Lock it in now. Yeah, we can't do like a slam dunk Miami pick now.
Or no, yeah. Dang. They might be it now. Like I'm just looking at the other teams. I don't know with what they're gonna
I
have
could
to
see
do
it
to
come
the
from the
team.
West. I could see it come from the West. I could see
That's a good point.
Colorado next year, or
The Galaxy.
Galaxy could fall off again.
Uh,
Hope not. Okay. Then we also had Columbus beat Toronto 2-0. Philly beat DC 3-1. They love playing at Audi Field, Philadelphia. Montreal beat New England 1-0. Miami beat the Red Bulls 2-0. Orlando beat St. Louis 2-1. Huge win by Orlando there, I think. Especially they had the lead. I think they blew it and got it back again. Dallas beat Austin 1-0. SKC beat San Jose 3-0. 3-0 Houston over RSL. That's right. They played them in the Open Cup and won 3-1. Then they beat them in the league 3-0. This time at Salt Lake. LA Galaxy beat Chicago 3-0. Talk about a surprise. And Vancouver beat Portland 3-2 as they still are moving on from Gio Savarese. Minnesota and Seattle drew 1-1. So what we got coming up this week, tomorrow, Wednesday, Atlanta versus Cincinnati, where Cincinnati can win and clinch a playoff spot. We kind of already know they're getting the playoffs anyway, but I guess it'll be nice to just know ahead of time if you're a Cincinnati fan. Charlotte faces off against Orlando. They just beat LAFC, and Orlando just beat St. Louis. So the two teams that just took down the top two Western teams are going up against it now. Miami faces Nashville in a replay of the Leagues Cup final. That game is free on Apple TV. New England versus the other New York. 7:30 Apple TV. That's free. NYCFC versus Montreal. That is free. Toronto and Philadelphia. That's free. They're like, hey, this team sucks. You're going to watch it for free. Austin and Seattle at 8:30. Chicago and Vancouver at 8:30. Houston and Columbus at 8:30. That one is free. Minnesota, Colorado at 8:30. That's free. St. Louis and Dallas. And then at 10:30, Portland, Salt Lake. That's at 10:30. And San Jose, LA at 10:30. Logan, tell me, what is your match of the midweek here? It's been a bit.
I was gonna say, yeah, I knew you didn't play that scary song, so that was good.
I can if you want.
No, don't. That guy yells. It scares me. Oh man, that's. I hate weeks that there's like odd games. Like there's not like a. Which matchup? I guess I'll go with the easiest one of them all because there was a really good game from them a couple of weeks ago. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. It feels like a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to go with Nashville and Miami. So yeah. I think ultimately, and depending on, I mean, Messi might not be involved as much, but who knows? At this point, I think Tata just plays him whenever Messi wants to, and Messi seems to want to play almost all games. So I'm sure we'll see Messi at some point. Maybe it's some Messi magic late. A midweek game. But a game, again, Miami's in an interesting spot. They're 23 games, right, played, which is, I think, the fewest in the Eastern Conference.
Yep.
Yes. They've got room to finagle their way in, Jordan, and you and I talked about this. They're 11 points behind Chicago. They've played 2 less games than Chicago. Everybody else above them has played more. Realistically, we're looking at a Miami team that could be, that's 27 points, math correct. They're 5 points down from Chicago, and things could get interesting. I do think that they'll be playing for something on decision day. I think we're heading into that direction, which would be really cool because of where they sat. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And then Nashville, again, they've lost 4 straight, so dropping quickly in the Eastern Conference. And like you said, Jordan, they're going to be playing a 1-game wildcard game. You don't want to be in that 8 and 9 spot. That's just a recipe for disaster. after having what looked like was going to be a good season for Nashville, they've quickly dropped with 4 straight losses. That's just that's not good enough, and the teams ahead of them have won quite a bit. So there's some distance being created between them and the teams that they're going to try to catch for the top of that Eastern Conference. But right now, I mean, we're starting to really get a pretty good idea as to the teams and where they're going to kind of be fighting for positioning. I guess if you take the middle tier of that Eastern Conference and kind of that bottom tier too. So, but that's wild. I didn't realize that. Looking at the standings, 43 points for the Union, 43 points for New England and Orlando, 42 for the Crew, and 41 for Atlanta. That's some that's some close positioning there.
Yeah, it's getting pretty tight at the top in the East. My pick for the midweek match, anyway, I'm really interested by Houston Columbus. I know I'm sounding like a huge Houston fan here, but Houston's been playing well. Columbus has been playing well. They're both fifth in their respective uh, conference. But Columbus has 42 points compared to Houston's 35, and Columbus has scored 50 goals and only given up 33, while Houston has scored only 34 and given up 31. But I'm very interested to see how that game goes. I think it can be a pretty fun match. When I saw that on the list, I was like, ooh, that's my pick. Hopefully Logan doesn't pick that. I know many people are probably screaming at their radios right now, like definitely Logan's is the better pick with Nashville and Miami rematch, but we just saw that. We just saw that. Then Saturday we have NYCFC in Vancouver at 3:30, Cincinnati, Orlando at 7:30, DC and Chicago at 7:30, Montreal, Columbus at 7:30, New England hosting Austin at 7:30. Then at 8:30 we have the following: Dallas and Atlanta, SKC St. Louis, Nashville, Charlotte. At 9:30 we have Salt Lake and Colorado. 10:30 we have LA Galaxy and Houston, San Jose, Minnesota, Seattle and Portland. And then on Sunday we have on FS1 and MLS Season Pass, Philadelphia Union and New York Red Bulls at 7:30, and then LAFC versus Miami at 10. What's your pick of the weekend here? You go in round 2 for Miami here?
Ask a lot of questions, Jordan. No, what a good host Jordan is, huh? It's really hard not to pick them again.
That's a good game. I mean,
I know,
LAFC.
but I don't want to pick them again. I just talked about them. You know what? I'm going for the Seattle Port. No, I'm kidding. That's going to be a great match. Gosh, it's so hard. Fine. You know what I'll do? I'll be a homer. I'm going to pick Cincinnati and Orlando, Jordan. Orlando in the thick of things in the playoffs. Didn't think I'd be saying that a couple months ago. Thought Orlando was dead to rights, going to be battling for that bubble spot in the playoffs, but they've played pretty darn well. 4 of the last 5. They got some wins. Ercan Kara almost got shipped out, so that was exciting for all Orlando fans. I know we were looking forward to maybe getting some money for him because things haven't gone as well and don't really need to go as well because I think Duncan McGuire's stepped into that role nicely. He has 8 goals this year. Ercan Kara has 5, but I thought he's played well. Ivan Angulo has looked really good for Orlando this year. I think probably the MVP for the team. I think he's, he creates enough. He defends well as an attacking player. He just does it all. It's like a Swiss Army knife. Oscar can play him in any position. I think he'd be fine, which is really exciting to watch. And I love watching him in person. Facundo Torres, I think we're getting the last look at him because I think over the summer, or sorry, not the summer, the winter, there's a good chance that he'll be gone. So, yeah, no, I think Orlando looks good. And then again, probably the best team in the league, which I think a lot of people agree with. They look so good, can clinch a playoff spot. So that's always exciting. And I want to see what Orlando can do. That's a tough competition. So we'll see how they stack up against the number 1 team in the East and probably heavy favorites to win MLS Cup this year.
Yeah, that's a good game. I think I will probably go with LAFC Miami, but also I will throw another one here. I was going to go Union Red Bulls, but actually Union just absolutely spanked the Red Bulls every time now. So kind of not much of a rivalry currently. But I'll go ahead and say give me SKC and St. Louis, right? Like that Missouri, Kansas type rivalry derby. I don't even know if they have a name for it yet, but SKC's kind of been playing better, right? I mean, like if we look at the standings, they're in 11th. But I mean, at one point they were way at the bottom. They're now 10 points up on the bottom. That's how well they've been playing. They're 3 points out of a playoff spot, SKC. So they're kind of hot and cold. And St. Louis, I feel like for a team that's top of the West, they've been kind of streaky at times. I mean, look, LAFC has choked a few games away lately, or else I think LAFC would be at the top of the West. I feel like St. Louis has been stuck at 44 points for a bit here. Part of that was the month-long break, but I think they've been at 44 for quite a bit now. So it'll be interesting to see how they can do against a resurgent SKC. So I find that game pretty interesting. But I think all eyes are going to be on LAFC Miami Sunday at 10 o'clock, if you can keep them open that late, for sure. Anything else before we head out? I think we covered everything.
No, I think the only thing to say is Christian Pulisic continues to bash in skulls. And Yunus Musa, or sorry, not Yunus Musa, wrong one. Balogun has signed for Monaco.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. So I like it.
He was linked to Chelsea. And I was like,
I don't like that. I'm glad he didn't end up there because it's where good players go to die.
Same thing. Tyler Adams didn't go there. He went to Bournemouth.
Yes. So I am excited about some of the U.S. men's national team moves. Sometimes I think it's more necessarily about the fit, and I think Balogun fits there perfectly. It's a good club. It's one that's historic. I think it's not great, but I think it's a team that definitely will compete. And I think playing against good competition, obviously, is going to help him tremendously. So anytime I think players get into kind of those, like I like the Bournemouth idea. I like if a team had gone, if one of our guys had gone to like a Brighton, like something mid-tier, good enough. Playing Pulisic going to Milan, I think that's been great too. You've seen what that's done. It's lit a spark under him. So I'm all for it. I'm all for us kind of playing those mid-tier with those mid-tier teams, just because you get stuck on that Chelsea, Man City, Newcastle, Liverpool shuffle. It ends up just being that. Well, I guess Liverpool, I'd honestly say Liverpool would actually have been pretty good fits for some of them. But in those other teams that have 26 guys, like that's just not a good fit for anybody. So,
same league he's going to. He's going to Monaco, which is in the French league. He was at Reims last year, so that's where he was thriving. I maybe would have liked to see him go to I think a step up from France, but playing at a big French team like Monaco, I think is a big step up. So hopefully he's able to still score. And like you said, Pulisic is thriving at Milan right now. He's got like 2 goals, and he's been playing actual minutes and having fun. He's teaming up with Giroud again. Like, as a Chelsea fan, wouldn't want to those former players. Man, I know, what a young hunk, man. Right? Seeing Giroud and him like together, and knowing that they're friendly with each other, and then even like who was the other former Chelsea player there I just saw? But I mean they've been playing well there. They're having fun. Hopefully he has an injury-free season and can just perform very well. AC Milan's a big club. I don't want to hear people say like, maybe the league isn't as good as it used to be, but that's a big club. He's going to be playing Champions League. He's going to be playing, in these big competitions. He might win some trophies. So good for him. If you want to give us any sort of follows or feedback, you can rate and review us on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. You can leave some comments in the YouTube comments below. We like to respond to those. And you can reach us at Stateside Show on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those places. You can reach us there. Email us stateside show@gmail.com. And we'll catch you next week.